Before we start, hit subscribe, because after you hear what was inside Room 9, you'll never sleep with your door open again. It started with a call that didn't make sense. At 3:12 a.m. on a cold March night in 2018, a neighbor reported hearing nothing. No crash, no scream, just a sudden silence that felt wrong. The house in question was a two-story Victorian at the edge of Mill Creek, Wisconsin. Once a small bed and breakfast, it had been converted into a boarding house for traveling contractors. 9 rooms, 1 hallway, and a reputation for being unnervingly quiet. Locals called it the house with no sound. When Officer Danielle Ruiz arrived, the porch light was on, but the windows were blacked out. No signs of struggle, no broken locks. But the front door stood slightly open, and that was enough for her to draw her gun. Inside, the air felt stale, thick, the kind of silence that hums in your ears when there should be noise. The living room was immaculate, coffee cups arranged neatly, a television frozen mid-broadcast, everything normal, except for the faint smell of bleach. Upstairs, 8 rooms lined the narrow hallway, all empty. The 9th door, at the end of the hall, was shut. Room 9. The house was leased by Gerald Pike, a 62-year-old handyman known for renting cheap rooms for temporary workers. He claimed he hadn't been there in 3 days, staying with his sister in Madison. But police noted something strange. When he arrived that morning to meet detectives, he had no keys. Inside Room 9, the door wasn't locked, it was sealed. Cape stretched across the frame, pressed perfectly flat, like it had been there for years. A small label read, "Do not enter, maintenance." When officers peeled back the tape and pushed the door open, the silence deepened. The temperature dropped noticeably, their breath fogging faintly under flashlight beams. Room 9 was spotless. Not empty, spotless. No dust, no personal belongings, just a neatly made bed, a small table, and a chair facing the wall. On that wall was a single electrical outlet. Every other one in the room had been removed, their sockets covered with metal plates. Detective Ruiz noticed something under the table, a small gray dictaphone, the kind journalists used in the 90s. She pressed play. A woman's voice, faint and trembling, filled the room. "This is Room 9, Day 11. I can't hear him anymore." Then static. They sent the recorder to the state lab. The initial playback analysis found multiple overlapping frequencies, meaning the tape had been recorded over and over again. But beneath the static, technicians isolated faint patterns, sounds consistent with breathing, pacing, and what one analyst described as compressed whispering. The guest log showed the last person to stay in Room 9 was Dr. Peter Havel, an acoustic engineer. He'd checked in on February 27, 2018, and vanished 4 days later. No sign of struggle, no trace of departure. Just silence. Detectives began digging into Havel's background. He wasn't your average guest. He'd been conducting private research on infrasound, low-frequency vibrations known to affect human perception. His most recent project involved mapping structural resonance in confined spaces. Essentially, he believed that certain buildings could hold frequencies, invisible patterns that could manipulate the brain. When police searched his car, they found blueprints of the boarding house with Room 9 highlighted in red. In the margins, Havel had scribbled one phrase over and over: "It absorbs everything." The house owner, Pike, denied knowing anything about the experiments, but detectives later found several invoices billed to his name for custom insulation, soundproof panels, and non-conductive plating. Why would a handyman buy materials used in anechoic chambers, the kind that eliminate all sound? When questioned again, Pike's story changed. He admitted he'd rented Room 9 to special researchers under a private agreement in exchange for cash. He claimed they promised it was safe, they just needed a space to measure silence. Detective Ruiz pressed him harder. What did they bring into the room? He hesitated, then said quietly, "A chair and something that hummed." 2 days later, the forensics team stripped Room 9. They found layers of hidden materials behind the drywall, sound-dampening foam, vibration sensors, and even lead mesh wired into the studs. The entire room had been turned into a containment chamber. But contain what? When they lifted the carpet, they found a steel plate welded into the floor. Underneath it, a sealed wooden box the size of a small suitcase. Inside, dozens of microcassettes labeled with dates and times. Every single one had been erased. Except one. It was marked 09:314 a.m. That timestamp matched the moment the neighbor had called 911, the night of the silence. They played the tape in the lab. At first, nothing, just the hiss of dead air. Then, faintly, a creak, the sound of someone shifting in a chair, followed by a single knock. And then, a voice. But not a human one. The waveform showed the frequency dipping below 20 Hz, too low for the human ear to fully perceive, but the machine picked it up. It wasn't words exactly, more like a drawn-out resonance, a vibration that carried shape and rhythm. The technician stopped a playback halfway when one of them reported feeling nauseated. His heart rate spiked. The sound had measurable physical effects. Ruiz replayed the rest herself. At the end of the tape, the voice, or whatever it was, rose into audible range just long enough to form one clear phrase. He stayed too long. That night, Ruiz drove back to the house alone. She needed to see Room 9 again. The hallway was darker than she remembered. The floorboards groaned faintly under her boots. When she reached the door, she noticed something new. The tape they had peeled off before was back, perfectly resealed. Her radio crackled with static, then silence. She reached for the knob. It was cold, vibrating faintly, and from the other side of the door came 3 slow knocks. But when the task force returned the next morning to breach Room 9 again, the door was open, and what they found inside didn't just rewrite the case. It questioned whether any of them had truly left the room in the first place.
By the time the task force arrived that morning, the house looked almost staged. The front door, which had been secured and sealed with police tape, was open just wide enough for a draft to slip through. Inside, the air smelled faintly of metal and detergent. All their markers, evidence tags, and protective tarps were gone. But what struck everyone first was the sound. There wasn't any. No birds outside, no hum from the refrigerator, even their footsteps seemed swallowed. Detective Ruiz led the team up the stairs, flashlight beam cutting across walls where dust had already resettled overnight. At the end of the hallway, the door to Room 9 stood ajar. The tape they'd replaced last night was gone. The edges of the frame were perfectly clean, as if it had never been sealed at all. She pushed it open. Room 9 looked different, subtly, but enough to make her chest tighten. The bed had been moved 2 feet to the left. The chair faced the opposite wall. The table was gone entirely. And on the floor, in the exact center of the room, lay a cassette. It wasn't one they'd collected. It was new, labeled in fresh black marker, "Play Me." Forensics did their sweep. No prints, no trace of who left it. The dust layer around the cassette was undisturbed, meaning it hadn't been placed there. It had somehow appeared after the scene had been secured. Back at the lab, the team loaded the tape into a controlled playback chamber. Ruiz insisted on being present. The recording started with silence, then faint static, and then her own voice. "This is Detective Laura Ruiz, Ridgefield PD. March 5th, 2018, room 9 is sealed." She froze. That was her log from the previous night. Her field mic hadn't been connected to any recorder. The playback continued. They heard her footsteps, her breathing, then 3 slow knocks, the same pattern from before. But this time, a response followed. A man's voice, calm, controlled. "Detective Ruiz, please don't open the door again." The technicians looked at her confused. She shook her head. That's not possible. No one else was there. She ordered the rest of the tape analyzed. The voice matched known database, but it carried trace audio signatures consistent with someone inside the same room as her. The problem was, room 9's acoustics don't allow for echo. The insulation prevents any reflected sound, meaning whoever spoke to her wasn't just inside the room, they were recorded from the same physical position as her microphone, like 2 voices sharing the same space. Meanwhile, the owner, Gerald Pike, had gone missing. His truck was found abandoned near a bridge 12 miles north, engine cold, driver's door locked from the inside. No sign of a struggle, but the interior smelled faintly of bleach and wood varnish, the same combination used in room 9's. His phone was found under the driver's seat. One last voicemail, timestamped 2:44 a.m. The message lasted less than 5 seconds. A faint hum, and then a woman's voice whispering, "You shouldn't have opened it." Detective Ruiz returned to the boarding house later that week with a new partner, Detective Miles Turner, a sound analysis specialist from Madison PD. Together, they planned to dismantle room 9 completely, every panel, wire, and beam. They started early, power tools humming in the cold morning air. The rest of the house creaked softly under their weight, but room 9 stayed still, the silence heavy as water. When Turner pried off the first layer of insulation, he stopped mid-motion. Beneath it was another layer, identical, seamless, perfectly installed. It wasn't soundproofing foam, it was wallpaper printed to look like soundproofing. Behind that, another layer of drywall, and behind that, something else. A hollow void, roughly 12 inches deep, stretching the entire perimeter of the room. Inside that gap, they found hundreds of tiny microphones, each wired to a single conduit leading into the floor. And etched into the concrete beneath it were words curved crudely by hand. "Don't listen too closely." Turner set up a portable recorder to capture the room's noise floor, the ambient silence levels, and walked outside to adjust settings. When he came back 5 minutes later, Ruiz was gone. The recorder, however, was still running. He rewound and listened. Footsteps, the soft rustle of fabric, then Ruiz's voice. "Hello? Who's there?" "Gerald." A pause, then faint breathing. "You shouldn't." The rest cut to static. When Turner replayed the last minute, something changed. Ruiz's voice came through again, but distorted, deeper, slower, like it had been stretched. "You shouldn't have listened." Backup arrived an hour later. The house was empty. No sign of Ruiz. Her radio lay in the middle of the room, battery drained. Forensics examined the audio recorder. The data log showed no interruptions, meaning she'd been in the room the entire time. But the file itself was wrong. The last frame contained a timestamp that didn't exist, March 12, 2025, 7 years into the future. By evening, the department sealed the house permanently. They labeled it unsafe structure and moved all evidence into a restricted archive. But 3 weeks later, an intern sorting through police audio files flagged something strange. A folder had appeared overnight labeled Room 9 Ruiz Edit. No one had uploaded it. The file contained a clean version of the original cassette, Ruiz's log, only this time her final words were different. "This is Detective Laura Ruiz. Room 9 is silent now. I can hear him again." The waveform pattern matched her voice, but not her tone. She sounded relieved. Detective Turner requested access to the boarding house one final time. Against orders, he entered room 9 alone at 11:43 p.m. with a single recorder and a flashlight. He spoke into the mic. "This is Detective Miles Turner. March 18th, 2018. I'm standing in room 9. The silence that followed lasted exactly 37 seconds. Then he whispered, "Laura?" There was a faint reply. A woman's voice, distant but clear. "You shouldn't have come back." His flashlight flickered once, and the recorder cut off mid-breath. The next morning, Turner's car was found idling outside the house. Trunk open, inside were his notes, all references to infrasound containment circled in red. On the last page, one sentence written in block capitals. "It's not about silence, it's about what listens back." But when the department archived the case and sealed room 9 for good, something began happening in the evidence vault. The recordings, all of them, started playing on their own. And what they said would make the FBI reopen the file. When the case files from the house with no sound were archived, the department thought it was over. Detective Ruiz was still missing, Detective Turner presumed dead, the property condemned, sealed under court order. But in early 2019, 10 months after the case went cold, the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit quietly reopened it. Not because of new witnesses or new evidence, but because of a malfunction. In the Ridgefield Evidence Vault, audio recorders from the case began activating themselves. One officer on the night shift swore he heard a woman's voice from the archive room. When he entered, every device from Room 9 collection, the microcassettes, the dictaphone, Turner's field mic, had powered on simultaneously. The waveform lights blinked in perfect sync, and the recording that played wasn't old. It was new. Timestamp, January 6th, 2019. The voice that came through was unmistakable. Detective Laura Ruiz. "This is Detective Ruiz. I'm still in room 9, but it's not where I thought it was." FBI agent Michael Corwin, an acoustic signal expert, led the reopening. He'd spent years studying how frequencies could interfere with brain waves, inducing disorientation, panic, or even memory loss. He didn't believe in hauntings. He believed in data. Corwin obtained the tapes under a federal warrant. When he ran spectral analysis on Ruiz's new recording, the results defied logic. The ambient background contained identical acoustic signatures to the original 2018 tapes, meaning the environment hadn't changed in a year. The problem, Room 9 had been physically demolished 6 months earlier. So how could Ruiz be describing a space that no longer existed? Corwin and his partner, Agent Renee Stahl, began a forensic reconstruction of the boarding house using blueprints, photographs, and frequency data. When they simulated Room 9's infrasound pattern, the low-frequency resonance discovered on the erased tapes, something strange happened. The waveform produced a standing frequency of 18.9 hertz. At that exact pitch, objects in the room began vibrating. Light fixtures, metal pens, even the lenses on their cameras. And after 5 minutes, Agent Stahl swore she heard whispering through her headset mic, but the audio log captured nothing. They shut the simulation down immediately. The analysis revealed a chilling hypothesis. Room 9 wasn't built to contain silence. It was built to record something beyond it. Every microphone embedded in its walls wasn't there to cancel noise, it was there to map it. Someone, maybe Dr. Peter Havel, maybe Pike, had tried to build a chamber that could isolate the pure frequency of unheard sound. But sound doesn't disappear. It reflects. And in that reflection, something had learned to mimic the people inside. When Corwin tracked the original contractor invoices used to build Room 9, one name appeared repeatedly under a false company address: peterhavel.phd. According to death records, Havel had been declared missing, presumed dead. But digital archives showed his university credentials were still active. Someone had logged into his account 2 weeks after Ruiz vanished from a network registered under Ridgefield County Maintenance, the same company Gerald Pike used for his work orders. The access logs listed one file name: echo_experiment09.final.dat. They found the file on a secured drive recovered from Pike's workshop. Corwin opened it expecting schematics. Instead, it was an audio clip. At first, just static. Then the sound of Ruiz's voice, "Miles, it's me. I found where it's coming from." Followed by another voice, "Laura, don't." And then both voices merged into one. A deep resonance layered with two tones, Ruiz and Turner speaking simultaneously, saying the same word in perfect unison: "Listen." The next day, Corwin arranged access to the ruins of the Mill Creek boarding house. Most of it had been torn down, but the foundation remained, a skeleton of concrete and insulation. Room 9's floor was still intact. Using ground-penetrating radar, they detected a dense cavity beneath the slab. They broke through the concrete and found a narrow maintenance shaft leading downward, about 6 feet deep. Inside, a rusted metal chair bolted to the floor. A small handheld recorder on its armrest, coated in dust. And something else. Faint indentations around the chair legs, consistent with multiple chairs having once been installed there, then removed. It wasn't one experiment. It was 9. Each numbered on the concrete. Only 09 remained. They retrieved the recorder, still intact. Its tape began mid-sentence. "They said it needed to be quiet so it could find us. But it was never about sound, it was about space." Corwin paused the playback. The audio levels showed a double waveform, like a duet. When he played it again, the second voice became clear. His own. But he had never been in that room before. 3 days later, the FBI sealed the investigation. Official cause: experimental hazard leading to unexplained acoustic interference. Unofficially, Corwin stayed obsessed. He took the recorder home, and on a quiet night, in his basement office, he hit play again, just once more to confirm what he'd heard. The tape ran normally for 40 seconds. Then, Ruiz's voice whispered, "Michael, it's almost quiet enough." He stared at the recorder. The timestamp on the display began to flicker, not forward, but backward. The room around him grew dense, the hum of silence pressing against his ears. And from somewhere deep inside the house, his wife called out from upstairs, "Michael, who were you talking to?" He didn't answer, because the voice from the recorder replied for him. "She can hear us now." The following morning, Corwin was found unconscious at his desk. The recorder was still spinning, though it had no tape inside. The speakers emitted a faint, rhythmic pulse, the same 18.9 Hz resonance found in Room 9. When the team reviewed his security footage, they saw him sit down at 11:47 p.m. But the footage after that didn't show him move. Instead, the camera glitched, looping the same 3 seconds over and over. And in each loop, his reflection in the monitor had shifted slightly. By the final frame, the reflection was smiling. He wasn't. The case was closed again. The official record labeled it "equipment malfunction, mental breakdown,
probable suicide. But those who worked the Ridgefield files noticed something unsettling months later. The official transcripts of Ruiz, Turner, and Corwin's recordings had been quietly altered. Every transcript ended the same way. Same words, same final line. Do not enter room 9. It's already listening. If you think this case is over, think again, because next week, another house just like it appeared, built by the same contractor, same design, same silence. Hit subscribe before it disappears.